The observation deck overlooked the massive training facility floating in orbit above Earth. Ambassador Velkus stood with his three-fingered hands clasped behind his back, watching the young humans below prepare their equipment. His silver skin reflected the cold station lights as he turned to his companion. "They are children," Commander Rixal said, her voice carrying the clicking undertones of the Velkari language. She tapped notes into her datapad with rapid precision. "The Galactic Council sent us to evaluate their military academy, and they show us children playing with tools." Velkus nodded slowly. He had traveled for 3 months to reach this remote system, expecting to see something impressive. The humans had applied for full membership in the Galactic Council, claiming their species deserved a seat among the ancient civilizations. But looking at the scene below, Velkus felt only disappointment. The human cadets wore simple blue uniforms. They looked so young, barely adults by galactic standards. One of them, a male with short dark hair, carried a container twice his size across the deck. Another, a female with her hair tied back, shouted instructions to her team while pointing at a holographic display. "How old are these cadets?" Velkus asked the human liaison officer standing nearby. "Most are between 19 and 22 standard years old," the officer replied, with a smile that Velkus found unsettling. Humans smiled too much. It made them look predatory. "Impossible," Rixal muttered. "They send infants to military training?" The liaison officer's smile grew wider. "They're adults by our standards. These are first-year students at our Orbital Defense Academy." Velkus exchanged a glance with Rixal. First-year students. The Velkari Empire trained their military officers for 15 years before they even touched real equipment. These humans were giving children access to weapons and spacecraft. Below them, a male cadet jogged past carrying 3 large tool cases. He wasn't even breathing hard. Velkus noted this detail. Earth was classified as a death world, a planet with gravity and conditions that would crush most galactic species. Perhaps these humans were simply adapted to heavy labor. "When will the demonstration begin?" Rixal asked. "Soon," the liaison officer said. "We're waiting for the instructor to arrive." Velkus activated his own recording equipment. The Galactic Council had asked for a full report on human military capabilities. More importantly, the Velkari High Command wanted every detail. For the past century, the Velkari Empire had been quietly planning an expansion into this region of space. Earth sat at a strategic location, and its resources were valuable. The humans didn't know this, of course. They thought the Velkari were friendly observers. Velkus felt no guilt about the deception. It was simply how galactic politics worked. The strong survived and the weak were conquered. An alarm sounded through the facility. The human cadets immediately stopped what they were doing and moved to designated positions. Their movements were quick and efficient, though Velkus noticed they lacked the formal precision of properly trained soldiers. A female cadet with sharp eyes and quick movements stepped forward. "Team leaders, report status," she called out. Her voice carried authority despite her young age. "Engineering ready," another female responded. This one had grease stains on her uniform and held a plasma torch casually in one hand. "Weapons ready," a male cadet said. He stood next to a rack of equipment that Velkus didn't recognize. "Logistics ready," called another female, this one holding a data pad similar to Rixal's. "Tactical ready," said a male with an eager expression that reminded Velkus of a hunting predator. The first cadet, apparently the team leader, nodded. "All teams standing by." An older human in a crisp uniform walked onto the deck. His hair was gray and he moved with the careful precision of someone who had seen real combat. "Cadets," he said, his voice calm but commanding. "Today's exercise is a rapid deployment scenario." Velkus leaned forward slightly. "Finally something interesting. The situation is as follows," the instructor continued. "A colony world in this sector has detected an incoming hostile fleet. The colony has minimal defenses. Your mission is to deploy a planetary defense network capable of repelling the attack." "Time limit?" the team leader asked. It was the female with the sharp eyes. Her name tag read, Mina. "The enemy fleet will arrive in 1 hour," the instructor said. Rixal's datapad slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Velkus felt his breathing tubes constrict. 1 hour, that was insane. The Velkari Empire needed 3 months minimum to establish even basic orbital defenses, and that was with experienced engineers and prefabricated components. 1 hour? Velkus said to the liaison officer. Surely this is an error. You mean 1 day? 1 week? 1 hour? The liaison officer confirmed, still smiling that disturbing human smile. This is a test of their ability to fail gracefully, Rixal said, recovering her datapad. You're showing us how they handle impossible situations. The liaison officer shrugged. It's a standard first-year exercise, watch. Below them, the cadets were already moving. The team leader, a male whose name tag read Hyun, pulled up a holographic display showing the colony world and surrounding space. Mina, I need sensor data on available resources. Jiwon, start cataloging everything we can use for construction. Doyun, begin tactical analysis. Kwan, inventory all weapons. Yuna, calculate power requirements. The cadets scattered to their tasks without hesitation. Velkus watched as they began pulling equipment from storage lockers, assembling tools, and calling out information to each other in rapid succession. They're going to hurt themselves, Rixal observed. Look at how fast they're moving. No safety protocols. No proper planning phase, Velkus had to agree. The humans were rushing around like insects in a disturbed nest. There was no order, no careful consideration. They were just doing things, grabbing tools and materials without any apparent system. Jiwon, the engineering specialist, was already cutting metal plates with a plasma torch. Sparks flew around her, but she didn't even flinch. Another cadet ran past carrying a massive coil of cable that must have weighed as much as Velkus himself. Hyun, we have 6 orbital construction drones available, Mina called out. Also 2 mining platforms and 1 disabled satellite we can salvage. Good, Hyun responded. Jiwon, can you make the mining platforms into weapon emplacements? Give me 20 minutes, Jiwon said without looking up from her work. 20 minutes. To convert industrial equipment into military hardware. Velkus made a note in his own records. The humans were optimistic to the point of delusion. They're going to fail, Rixal said quietly. And then they'll understand why the Galactic Council has standards. Velkus nodded, but something nagged at him. The humans didn't look worried. They looked focused and determined. The team leader, Hyun, coordinated multiple tasks at once while simultaneously assembling some kind of control station. The others worked with an intensity that seemed almost violent. How long has it been? Velkus asked. The liaison officer checked his chronometer. 4 minutes. Only 4 minutes, and already the deck was transformed into a construction zone. Components were scattered everywhere. 3 different teams were building separate structures simultaneously. It looked like chaos, but Velkus noticed something. Despite the apparent disorder, nothing was colliding. The teams moved around each other smoothly. When one cadet needed space, others automatically adjusted. When someone called for a tool, it appeared immediately. Maybe it wasn't chaos. Maybe it was something else entirely. Velkus settled in to watch. This would be educational, he thought. Even watching them fail would provide valuable intelligence about human capabilities. Or rather, their lack of capabilities. He had no idea how wrong he was. 15 minutes into the exercise, Velkus realized he had stopped breathing normally. His respiratory tubes kept constricting as he watched the impossible unfold before him. The human cadets had split into 5 teams, each working on different aspects of the defense network. What had seemed like random chaos now revealed itself as coordinated parallel operations. They weren't following a plan. They were creating the plan as they worked. Hyun stood at the central command station, which hadn't existed 10 minutes ago. He monitored 6 different holographic screens simultaneously, calling out adjustments while his hands flew across control panels.
Jiwon, shift the second platform 30 degrees starboard.
Doyun, what's the coverage gap in Sector 4? Filling it now, Doyun responded from across the deck. He was programming targeting solutions into what had been a civilian communications relay. His fingers moved so fast across the keyboard that Velkus couldn't track individual keystrokes. Jiwon worked on the mining platforms with 3 other cadets. They had somehow moved the massive industrial equipment into position, using nothing but magnetic clamps and leverage. No advanced technology, just simple physics applied with brutal efficiency. That platform weighs 40 tons, Rixal whispered. Her voice carried an edge of fear. How are they moving it? Deathworld strength, the liaison officer said casually. Earth's gravity is more than twice what your species evolved in. These kids have been lifting heavy things since they could walk. Velkus watched as a female cadet, barely 5.5 feet tall, single-handedly repositioned a steel beam that must have weighed several hundred pounds. She just grabbed it, lifted, and moved it. Like it was nothing. Impossible, Rixel breathed. Very possible, the liaison officer corrected. That's actually light work for her. On another part of the deck, Quan was assembling weapons. But these weren't standard galactic weapons. Velkus recognized some components, salvaged from various systems, but the way Quan was combining them made no sense. He was attaching a mining laser to a missile guidance system. He was connecting power cells in series that should have exploded from feedback. That's not safe, Velkus said, pointing at Quan's work. Those power cells will overload. The liaison officer glanced at the screen. Probably not. Humans have a pretty good intuitive grasp of engineering. If he's building it that way, it'll work. But it violates standard safety protocols, Rixal protested. Human safety protocols are different, the liaison officer said. They're designed for humans. Velkus was beginning to understand what that meant. The galactic safety standards assumed species that were fragile, that needed protection from radiation, pressure changes, and physical stress. Humans apparently didn't need as much protection because they were naturally resilient. Mina coordinated communications between teams. She had set up a network using the facility's basic systems, but she had somehow enhanced it beyond its original specifications. Multiple data streams flowed across her screens, and she tracked all of them, while simultaneously directing drone operations. Drone 3 is in position, she called out. Deploying sensor package. The construction drone released a cluster of satellites that spread out in a pre-programmed pattern. Except they hadn't been pre-programmed. Velkus had watched Mina write that code in under 3 minutes. Time check, Hyun called. 22 minutes elapsed, Yuna responded. She managed logistics from a station surrounded by supply crates and equipment manifests. Power distribution is at 60% efficiency. I can get it to 75 if we reroute through the auxiliary systems. Do it, Hyun said. We need maximum power for the weapons grid. Yuna's fingers danced across her controls. Within seconds, power indicators across the deck shifted to green. She had just optimized an entire energy network in the time it took Velkus to process what she had said. Jiwon's voice cut through the organized chaos. First platform is ready for testing. Quan, send a targeting solution. Quan linked his weapons control to Jiwon's platform. The converted mining equipment hummed to life. The massive industrial laser, now mounted on a rotating base, tracked across an imaginary target. Lock confirmed, Quan said with satisfaction. This thing has more power than I expected. We could probably punch through capital ship armor. Good, Hyun said. How long until Platform 2 is ready? 10 minutes, Jiwon replied. She was already moving to the second platform, plasma torch igniting as she walked. Velkus looked at his chronometer. 25 minutes had passed. In that time, these cadets had moved equipment, salvaged materials, built control systems, established a sensor network, and created one functional weapons platform. And they showed no signs of slowing down. They're working too fast, Rixel said. She sounded disturbed. This pace isn't sustainable. They'll make mistakes. But as Velkus watched, he saw no mistakes. He saw improvisation and adaptation. When a power coupling failed, a cadet swapped it for a different type in seconds. When a structural support proved inadequate, another cadet reinforced it with a clever arrangement of cables and clamps. Doyen pulled up a tactical display. Hyun, we've got good coverage on the primary approach vectors, but we're exposed on the planetary shadow side. Solutions? Hyun asked without taking his eyes off his screens. We could position the disabled satellite there, Doyen suggested. It doesn't have weapons, but we could rig it as a sensor relay and maybe pack it with the spare mining charges for a surprise. A bomb? Velkus said out loud. He's suggesting they build a bomb? A mine, technically, the liaison officer corrected. And yes, that's pretty standard human tactical thinking. That's terrifying, Rixal said. That's effective, the liaison officer countered. Hyun considered the suggestion for 2 seconds. Do it, Yuna. Assign 2 cadets to help Doyen. I want that satellite positioned in 30 minutes. On it, Yuna said, already redirecting personnel. The teams shifted smoothly. 2 cadets broke off from other tasks and joined Doyen without missing a beat. They knew what to do without lengthy explanations. They just understood. Velkus watched a male cadet whose name tag read Seok treating another cadet's injury. The injured cadet had apparently burned his hand on hot metal. Seok applied a medical gel, wrapped the hand in a quick bandage, and sent the cadet back to work. The entire treatment took less than 2 minutes. Shouldn't that cadet rest? Velkus asked. It's a minor burn, the liaison officer said. He's fine. He just injured himself, Rixel protested. And now he's back to work, the liaison officer said. Deathworlders are tough. You're going to see a lot of things that seem excessive to you. Try not to judge by your own species' standards. Velkus tried to do that. He really did. But watching these young humans work in conditions that would hospitalize his own people was deeply unsettling. Jiwan completed the second weapons platform ahead of schedule. Platform 2 is online, she announced. Moving to Platform 3, 3 platforms. They were building 3 weapons platforms. In under an hour. With student cadets, how? Rixel whispered. How are they doing this? Velkus had no answer. He watched Hyun coordinate the various teams with calm efficiency. He watched Mina manage a sensor network that was becoming more sophisticated by the minute. He watched Kwon turn civilian equipment into military hardware using nothing but creativity and determination. Time check, Hyun called again. 38 minutes, Yuna responded. We're ahead of schedule, ahead of schedule. They were ahead of schedule on an impossible task. Velkus looked at Rixal. She stared back at him with wide eyes. They were both thinking the same thing. These weren't elite soldiers. These weren't experienced engineers. These were first-year students. Children, by galactic standards. And they were building a planetary defense network in less time than it took the Velkari Empire to file the paperwork to begin such a project. What have we been watching? Rixal asked quietly. Velkus didn't answer. He was too busy recalculating everything he thought he knew about humans. On the deck below, the cadets continued their work. They didn't know they were performing a miracle. To them, this was just another training exercise. That thought terrified Velkus more than anything else he had witnessed. The 40-minute mark brought new revelations that made Velkus question everything he knew about galactic civilization. Jiwan floated outside the station in a basic pressure suit, welding components on the third weapons platform. She worked in hard vacuum in freezing temperatures exposed to radiation that would kill most galactic species in minutes, and she was doing it casually like someone might repair a door hinge. She's outside, Velkus said, his voice rising slightly. She's working in space with minimal protection. Standard EVA suit, the liaison officer confirmed. Rated for 2 hours of work in hard vacuum. Rixel checked her datapad frantically. Our species requires full environmental shields for any exterior work. The radiation alone would be lethal. Humans evolved under a star that puts out a lot of radiation, the liaison officer explained. They have higher natural resistance. Plus, Earth's magnetic field wasn't always stable during their evolution. They adapted. That word kept coming up. Velkus was beginning to understand what it really meant. Inside the station, other cadets were demonstrating equally disturbing capabilities. 2 of them were lifting a power generator that massed over 300 kilograms. They weren't using any assistance. Just their own muscles. They carried it across the deck, set it down gently, and connected it to the network without even breathing hard. Deathworld gravity, Velkus muttered to himself. Doyen had finished rigging the disabled satellite. His solution was elegant and terrifying. He had packed the satellite with mining explosives, connected them to a proximity sensor, and programmed it to detonate if enemy ships approached. It was a trap, pure and simple. A very lethal trap. That's a war crime in 14 systems, Rixel observed. It's a mine in human doctrine, the liaison officer said. Perfectly legal by their standards. Their standards are frightening, Rixel whispered. Velkus had to agree. The humans had a casual relationship with violence that spoke to their evolutionary history. They were predators. Not just in hunting ability, but in thinking. They saw tactical problems and immediately thought of ways to hurt their enemies. Hyun studied the growing defense network on his displays. Mina, how's the sensor coverage? Excellent, Mina replied. We've got overlapping fields across all approach vectors. If they try to come in quiet, we'll hear them. If they come in fast, we'll see them first. She had built that sensor network using civilian satellites, construction drones, and basic radio equipment. It shouldn't have worked. But looking at her displays, Velkus could see it did work. Possibly better than military-grade systems that cost millions of credits. Kwon weapons status? Hyun asked. 3 platforms online and fully armed, Kwon reported. The converted mining lasers have more range than standard defense weapons. The missiles are a bit improvised, but they'll fly straight and hit hard. Improvised missiles. Velkis wrote that down. The humans could improvise military weapons in under an hour. Yuna called out a warning. Power consumption is spiking. We're at 85% capacity. Can we get more? Hyun asked. Not without bringing the secondary reactor online, Yuna said. Do it. Yuna hesitated for just a moment. Sir, the secondary reactor hasn't been tested since installation. There could be issues. We're in a simulation, Hyun reminded her. Worst case, it explodes and we fail the exercise. Best case, we have unlimited power. I'll take those odds. He would take those odds. Velkis felt a chill run through his body. The human was willing to risk an explosion for tactical advantage. Even in a simulation, that kind of thinking was aggressive. Yuna's fingers flew across her controls. Deep in the station, systems activated that had been dormant for months. The secondary reactor came online without incident. Power indicators across the board jumped to green. Full power available, Yuna announced with a satisfied smile. They had just activated an untested reactor in the middle of a combat exercise. And it worked. Because of course it did. Selk moved through the teams, checking on everyone. He had treated 3 minor injuries so far, burns, cuts, and 1 twisted ankle. None of the injured cadets had stopped working. They just got treated and continued their tasks. Don't they feel pain? Velkis asked. Of course they do, the liaison officer said. They just don't let it stop them. Pain is information to humans. It tells them something's wrong, but it doesn't make decisions for them. That was perhaps the most alien thing Velkis had heard all day. His species, like most in the galaxy, responded to pain by stopping harmful activities. It was a basic survival instinct. But humans apparently overrode that instinct routinely. A female cadet named Hana climbed into a small spacecraft. It was a basic trainer craft used for teaching orbital maneuvers. She launched from the deck and began testing the sensor network from outside the station. Is that safe? Rixal asked. Safe enough, the liaison officer said. She's a qualified pilot. How qualified can she be? Rixal protested. She's a first-year student. She's been flying since she was 16, the liaison officer said. Most humans learn to operate vehicles as teenagers. They gave teenagers control of spacecraft. Hana's voice came through the communication system. Sensor network is tracking me perfectly. I'm going to try some evasive maneuvers. Don't shoot me, Quan. No promises, Quan replied, his tone joking. They were making jokes. In the middle of a high-stress exercise, they were joking with each other. Hana pushed her craft through a series of maneuvers that made Velkis feel queasy just watching the telemetry. She dove toward the station, pulled up at the last second, spun on 3 axes, and accelerated away at dangerous speeds. The sensor network tracked her through all of it. Beautiful coverage, she reported. Even when I tried to hide in the station's shadow, you had me. This network is solid. Thanks for testing it, Mina said. Come back in. We need you for final setup. Hana brought her craft around in a tight loop that should have caused structural damage. The craft was fine. She docked smoothly and rejoined her team. Juwan came back inside from her EVA work. She removed her helmet and took a drink of water. Her face was flushed and sweaty, but she looked satisfied. Platform 3 is done. All systems check out. We're ready to go live. Time, Hyuna asked. 52 minutes, Yuna called back. 8 minutes remaining. They had built an entire planetary defense network in 52 minutes. Velkis looked at his comprehensive notes. He had documented everything. Every impossible feat, every casual demonstration of capability that should have been impossible. His datapad was full of observations that would change Velkari's strategic planning forever. They're going to finish, Rixal said quietly. They're actually going to complete this exercise. Yes, Velkis agreed. They are. But that means, Rixal continued, her voice shaking slightly, that everything we planned, everything the High Command has been working toward, will need to be reconsidered, Velkis finished. Yes. On the deck below, Hyun ran final checks on all systems. Engineering, weapons, sensors, logistics, tactical. All teams report status. Engineering green, Ji-won said. Weapons green, Quan confirmed. Sensors green, Mina reported. Logistics green, Hyuna stated. Tactical green, Doyeon added. Hyun nodded. All systems ready. Bringing the defense network online. Displays across the command station lit up. The 3 weapons platforms, the sensor network, the improvised mine, the power grid, everything connected seamlessly. It was a complete, functional military-grade defense system, built by students. In less than an hour, The instructor stepped forward. Defense network is online. Enemy fleet is entering sensor range. The simulation will now begin. Velkus gripped the observation rail tightly. He was about to see if this impossible defense system would actually work in combat, even simulated combat. Deep in his mind, he already knew the answer, and it terrified him. The Velkari Empire had made a terrible miscalculation. They had assumed humanity was weak. They had planned an invasion based on that assumption. Watching these cadets work had taught Velkus the truth. Humanity wasn't weak. Humanity was perhaps the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and they didn't even seem to know it. That thought would haunt him for the rest of his life. The simulated enemy fleet appeared on the sensors like ghosts materializing in the void. 12 ships total, 4 heavy cruisers, 6 destroyers, and 2 carriers. It was a serious assault force, the kind that would require a full planetary defense grid to repel. Mina's sensor network detected them immediately. Contact: 12 hostile ships entering Sector 7. Range: 400,000 kilometers and closing. Hyun's calm voice cut through the sudden tension. All stations, this is command. Execute Defense Plan Alpha. Weapons free on my mark. Velkus watched the tactical display with complete focus. The enemy ships were moving in a standard attack formation, spreading out to hit multiple targets. It was textbook military doctrine, the kind taught in every academy in the galaxy. The human cadets didn't follow any textbook. They're splitting into 3 groups, Doyen observed, trying to overwhelm us with multiple angles. Let them, Hyun said. Mina, track all targets. Assign priority based on threat level. Quan, prepare firing solutions for groups 1 and 2. Doyen, you handle group 3 with the mine. The defense network responded instantly. The weapons platforms rotated smoothly, tracking their assigned targets. The improvised missiles armed themselves. The sensor network fed constant updates to all systems. Quan's fingers moved across his controls with practiced ease. Firing solutions locked. Platform 1 has targets Alpha through Delta. Platform 2 has targets Echo through Hotel. Platform 3 is in reserve. Distance to effective range? Hyun asked. 30 seconds, Quan replied. Velkus noticed something strange. The humans weren't firing yet. Most species would have launched weapons as soon as targets were in extreme range, trying to score lucky hits. But the humans were waiting, letting the enemy come closer. They're being too patient, Rixal whispered. They should fire now. The liaison officer smiled. Watch. 20 seconds passed. The enemy fleet continued advancing, growing more confident. They probably thought the defense network was weak or incomplete. They were wrong. Range optimal, Quan announced. All targets locked. Fire, Hyun commanded. What happened next occurred so fast that Velkus almost missed it. All 3 weapons platforms fired simultaneously. The converted mining lasers, far more powerful than their civilian origin suggested, lanced out across space. The improvised missiles launched in perfect coordination, their flight paths calculated to intersect with enemy ships at precisely the right moments. The first enemy destroyer exploded before it could react. The mining laser had punched straight through its shields and hull. The second destroyer took 3 missiles in rapid succession and broke apart. A heavy cruiser tried to evade, but G1's platform tracked it smoothly and burned through its engine section. 3 kills confirmed, Mina reported. Enemy fleet is breaking formation. They had destroyed a quarter of the enemy force in the opening salvo. Velkus felt his breathing tubes constrict again. The efficiency was terrifying. The enemy fleet adapted quickly, as good simulations should. The remaining ships scattered, trying to come at the defense network from multiple angles. They launched their own missiles and began returning fire. Incoming fire, Mina warned, tracking 42 missiles and multiple beam weapons. Countermeasures, Hyun ordered calmly. Yuna activated systems that Velkus hadn't even noticed being built. Chaff launchers, electronic countermeasures, and point defense systems all came online. The improvised defenses started intercepting missiles. Many got through, but they hit hardened positions that the cadets had reinforced specifically for this purpose. Platform 1 took a hit, Ji-won reported. Minor damage. Still operational. Keep firing, Hyun said. The battle continued at a pace that left Velkus struggling to follow. The humans processed information faster than he could read it. They made decisions in seconds that should have required minutes of analysis. They adapted to enemy tactics almost instantly. A heavy cruiser tried to circle around to hit them from an unexpected angle. Doyen saw it coming. Target moving into Sector 3. Approaching the mine, Let it come, Hyun said. The cruiser advanced confidently, thinking it had found a gap in the defenses. It was wrong. Proximity trigger in 3 seconds, Doyeon counted down. 2, 1, detonation. The disabled satellite, packed with mining explosives, detonated directly beside the heavy cruiser. The explosion ripped through the ship's shields and tore open its hull. The cruiser spun out of control, venting atmosphere and debris. That's 4, Mina announced. The remaining enemy ships hesitated. They had lost a third of their force and hadn't managed to damage the defense network significantly. Velkis could see their problem. The human defense system wasn't just functional. It was deadly. Enemy is regrouping, Doyeon observed. They're consolidating for a combined assault. Classic mistake, Hyun said. Kwon, prepare full salvo. Target the carriers first. Without fighter support, the cruisers are vulnerable. Understood, Kwon said. He retargeted all weapons on the 2 carrier ships. Ready on your command. Fire. Every weapon fired at once. Lasers and missiles converged on the 2 carriers from multiple angles. The carriers had heavy shields, but not heavy enough. The concentrated firepower overwhelmed their defenses. Both carriers exploded within seconds of each other. 6 down, Mina confirmed. Half the enemy fleet was destroyed. The simulation wasn't even close. The remaining 6 ships tried one desperate assault. They charged directly at the defense network, firing everything they had. It was brave but futile. Jiwon's platforms tracked them calmly. Kwon assigned targets with cold precision. Mina fed targeting data continuously. The weapons fired again and again. One by one, the enemy ships died. A destroyer broke apart under sustained laser fire. A cruiser took missiles to its bridge and went dark. Another destroyer tried to ram the station in a suicide run, but Kwon destroyed it at point-blank range. Last target destroyed, Mina announced. All enemy ships eliminated. Silence filled the observation deck. Then the instructor's voice came through the speakers.
Exercise complete.
Time 58 minutes, 34 seconds. Perfect defensive victory. 0 friendly casualties. Excellent work, cadets. The human cadets relaxed. Some smiled. Others high-fived each other. They looked pleased but not surprised. Like this was exactly what they had expected to happen. Velkis stood frozen. He had just watched first-year cadets achieve a perfect military victory against a superior force using equipment they had built themselves in less than an hour. Rixal had dropped her datapad again. She didn't bother picking it up. Her eyes were wide with something between fear and awe. Impossible, she whispered. That was impossible. No, the liaison officer corrected gently. That was just a Tuesday for them. This is a standard first-year exercise. They do harder ones in their second year. Harder ones. There were harder exercises than this. Velkis looked at Rixal. She looked back at him. They were both thinking about the invasion plans sitting in secure files back on their homeworld. Plans that assumed human military capabilities were limited. Plans that assumed the Velkari Empire could conquer Earth with a modest fleet and occupation force. Those plans were based on complete fantasy. If these are their students, Rixal said slowly, what are their actual soldiers like? Nobody answered. Nobody needed to. Hyun and his team were already cleaning up, storing equipment and filing reports. Just another day of training. Just another exercise completed successfully. They had no idea they had just saved their world from an invasion. They had no idea that 2 alien observers were having their entire worldview shattered. Velkis accessed his datapad with shaking fingers. He had a report to write. More importantly, he had a warning to send. The Velkari Empire had been planning to invade Earth. After seeing what he just saw, Velkis knew that invasion would not be a war. It would be suicide. He began composing his message to the High Command. It would be the most important message he ever sent. The humans must never know how close they had come to war. And the Velkari must never make the mistake of underestimating them again. The observation deck had cleared. The cadets had finished their post-exercise debriefing and left for their next classes. Only Velkis, Rixal, the liaison officer, and a new figure remained. Admiral Park entered with the measured steps of someone who had commanded fleets in real battles. His gray hair and lined face spoke of decades of service. He wore his uniform with quiet pride, and his eyes held a sharpness that made Velkis uncomfortable. Ambassador Velkis. Commander Rixal, Admiral Park said, nodding to each of them. I hope the demonstration was informative. Demonstration. He called it a demonstration. like it had been planned specifically for them. Velkus felt a cold understanding creep into his mind. "You knew," he said quietly. "You knew we were coming to assess your military capabilities. The Galactic Council informed us of your visit," Admiral Park confirmed. "We were happy to show you what our cadets can do." Cadets. He emphasized that word deliberately. Rixal had found her voice. "This was a standard exercise? You didn't prepare anything special for our visit?" "No," Admiral Park said simply. "This is what we do every day. Training, improving, preparing. Would you like to see the results from our second-year exercises, or perhaps our final-year war games?" "No," Velkus said quickly. He didn't need to see more. He had seen enough. Admiral Park studied them both for a long moment. "You have something to tell me," he said. It wasn't a question. Velkus looked at Rixal. She nodded slightly. They had discussed this during the simulation, speaking in quick Velkari between the explosions and victories. They had made a decision. "The Velkari Empire has been planning military operations in this region of space," Velkus said carefully. "For the past century, our High Command has been developing contingency plans for expansion. Expansion into human space," Admiral Park said, still not a question. "Yes," Velkus admitted. "We believed, based on our initial observations, that humanity would be a manageable obstacle. We were prepared to offer you a choice. Join the Velkari Empire peacefully or face conquest." The liaison officer tensed. Admiral Park remained perfectly still, but something changed in his eyes. "Something dangerous, and now?" the Admiral asked. "Now we understand that our entire strategic assessment was wrong," Rixal said. "Fundamentally, completely wrong." Velkus activated his datapad and displayed his analysis. "Based on what we observed today, I calculate that any invasion of Earth would require a minimum fleet strength of 3,000 ships. Even then, success is unlikely. If your students can do what we witnessed, your trained soldiers would be exponentially more capable." 3,000 ships, Admiral Park repeated. "That would be the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history." "Yes," Velkus said. "And it still wouldn't be enough. Because we also have to consider the human response. You don't just defend. You counterattack. You adapt. You improvise. Every calculation we have suggests that even if we took Earth, we would lose everything trying to hold it." Rixal pulled up her own analysis. "The death world factor changes everything. Your soldiers can work in environments that would kill our troops. Your engineers can build in conditions we can barely survive. Your pilots can withstand acceleration that would crush our bones. And your tactical thinking," she trailed off, looking for words. "Our tactical thinking," Admiral Park prompted, "is terrifying," Rixal finished honestly. "You see a problem and immediately think of 10 ways to weaponize it. That disabled satellite turned into a mine. That mining equipment turned into weapons platforms. You make war out of peace with frightening ease." Admiral Park was quiet for a moment. "We're a young species," he said finally. "We spent most of our history fighting each other. We're good at war because we've had a lot of practice." "Too much practice," Velkus said. "Any species that survived on a death world while simultaneously fighting itself must be incredibly dangerous. We prefer to think of ourselves as survivors," Admiral Park said. "But I understand your assessment." Velkus took a deep breath. "Ambassador Velkus of the Velkari Empire formally requests a private communication with the human government. We have information regarding military planning that Earth's leadership should know about." "You want to confess your invasion plans," Admiral Park said. "We want to explain that those plans are being permanently scrapped," Velkus corrected. "And we want to propose an alternative." "I'm listening." "The Velkari Empire wishes to establish a mutual defense treaty with humanity," Velkus said. "We have ships. You have capabilities we lack. Together we could create a powerful alliance." Rixal added, "We're also prepared to share information about other species who might be considering similar plans. We know we're not the only ones who have looked at Earth and thought about conquest." Admiral Park's expression didn't change, but Velkus saw something flicker in his eyes. "Concern, anger? Determination? How many other species?" the Admiral asked quietly. "At least 4 that we know of," Rixal said. "The Velkari Empire has the most advanced intelligence network in this region. We've intercepted communications, analyzed fleet movements, and identified strategic planning from multiple governments." "And you'll share this intelligence with us?" "Yes," Velkus said. "Consider it our apology for contemplating invasion. and our payment for a treaty of alliance. Admiral Park was silent for a long time. Then he smiled slightly. You came here to spy on us. You were planning an invasion, and now you want to be our friends? Yes, Velkus said without shame. Because the alternative is being your enemies, and that would be suicidal. The Admiral laughed. It was a genuine sound, warm and slightly disbelieving. Honest, I appreciate honesty. All right, Ambassador. I'll bring your proposal to the appropriate authorities. We'll need to discuss terms, verify your intelligence, and probably have some very uncomfortable diplomatic conversations. We understand, Velkus said. We're prepared for that. Good. Admiral Park gestured to the empty deck below. Those cadets you watched today, Hyun, Jiwon, Mina, and the others, they have no idea what they prevented. They think they just passed an exercise. Perhaps it's better that way, Rixal suggested. Perhaps, Admiral Park agreed. Or perhaps someday they'll learn that their routine training demonstration prevented a war. Velkus looked down at the empty deck. He could still see the teams working, building, fighting. He could still hear their calm voices coordinating impossible tasks. They would have won that war, Velkus said quietly. Wouldn't they? Admiral Park didn't answer directly. Earth has spent its entire history learning how to survive. We fought nature, we fought each other. We fought diseases and disasters and every possible threat our world could throw at us. And we're still here. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the smartest. But we're very, very hard to kill. I understand, Velkus said. He did understand. Finally. The meeting ended with formal diplomatic pleasantries. Arrangements were made for future discussions. Treaties would be negotiated. Intelligence would be shared. The Velkari Empire and humanity would become allies instead of enemies. But the most important message had already been sent. Before leaving the observation deck, Velkus had transmitted his full report to the Velkari High Command. The message was simple and clear. Earth was not a target. Earth was an ally, and any species that tried to invade Earth would face extinction. Within hours of receiving that report, the Velkari High Command began destroying invasion plans. Data files were deleted. Fleet movements were cancelled. Resources were redirected. Within days, the Velkari began sharing Velkus's report with other species. Not out of kindness, but out of practical concern. If any species was foolish enough to attack Earth and lose, the human counterattack might destabilize the entire region. Within weeks, 6 different alien governments quietly scrapped their own plans regarding Earth. Some, like the Velkari, proposed alliances. Others simply marked human space as a no-conflict zone and redirected their attention elsewhere. Within months, the Galactic Council voted unanimously to grant humanity full membership. Not because Earth had asked for it, but because keeping humanity outside the Council suddenly seemed extremely dangerous. The humans accepted membership with gratitude and enthusiasm. They sent ambassadors, opened trade routes, and shared technology. They were friendly, cooperative, and peaceful. They never knew that their acceptance was driven by fear as much as respect. Back at the Orbital Defense Academy, Hyun and his team moved on to their next exercise. They learned new skills, practiced new tactics, and prepared for challenges they might never face. Jiwon improved her engineering techniques. Kwon refined his weapons systems. Mina enhanced her sensor networks. Doyen developed new tactical approaches. Yuna optimized every system she touched. They were just students doing their homework. They had no idea they had changed galactic history. Admiral Park watched them from the observation deck sometimes. He never told them what their exercise had really meant, but he made sure every cadet understood one simple truth. Earth had survived everything their own world threw at them. Now they were ready for whatever the galaxy might bring. And the galaxy, having seen what they could do, decided it was much better to have humans as friends than as enemies. The invasion fleets that had been planned were scrapped. The weapons that had been prepared were stood down. The strategies that had been developed were abandoned.